have begun to outline, but especially in relationship to this month, where we pay tribute to a king. And so much of the energy of the civil rights movement evolving in this particular week in conversation. Of course, the actions yesterday of Rudolph, as Reverend Sharpton called him, Wallace Giuliani, certainly brings back to light the kind of struggle that our brothers and sisters had during the 1950s and 60s. Attorney Maddox, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Imhotep. Glad to see you.
Brother, good to have you with us this morning as well.
Thank
you. In terms of this point, and let's maybe start off on this with the King movement, it is sometimes lost on people that when Dr. King and the civil rights movement were engaging in their various actions, that they certainly weren't doing it for publicity, we know, and they certainly weren't doing it on the basis of simply having a drink of water, so to speak, or being able to eat in a restaurant. There were laws involved. There was an attempt to change the legal structure. And I'd like to have you talk for a few moments about your own view of, in retrospect now, what those particular changes, legally speaking, have really meant to us at this point in time, because the Republicans seem committed to turning back the clock on some of those changes. So what did occur legally that is so upsetting to some in other communities?
Well, I think really it's not really a question of what really occurred. I think the real question is really the different philosophies that different men and women possess concerning the law. And I think that as we look at our current condition, what is missing is a philosophical basis. And that even when we act, we do not act from a philosophical basis. In many instances, emotions, other instances, it's rhetoric. But there's no philosophical basis. When you go to Dr. King, the first thing that has to be noted about him is that he was a philosopher.
That's true.
First and foremost. And he acted pursuant to his philosophy. And in many instances, the goals of his philosophy was changing because he was a changing person, as anybody would be who has not sold out. It's always an evolutionary process to any people of that nature. But the real struggle, and this is the debate that actually exists beyond all philosophers, and maybe to some extent to jurists and those who are in the legal profession, would be the question of the separation of the integration of morality with laws.
Okay.
And if you look at, for example, someone like a Rudolph Giuliani, he has a particular name. He operates pursuant to a particular theory, and that is one of positive law. And in very simple terms, that means the separation of morality from law, in which a sovereign enunciate and promulgate certain laws without any real direction from morality itself. And then you have, on the other hand, those who are naturalists or who advocate natural law. And they see man in a universal creative scheme of the Creator. And that the aim of man law is to carry out that scheme of the Creator toward the universe. And so with them, while they will give deference to human law or man-made law, they will only give deference to it if it satisfies their conscience as to what is right or wrong.
So we get Dr. King saying that one has to fight against unjust laws on the moral basis and philosophical basis you just described.
Right. And then, for example, let's say in a case of, in many jurisdictions, for example, there was a law that said that if you see a felon fleeing, you have a right to shoot that person down. And that went to your Supreme Court, and it was reversed on some other grounds. But not that the United States Supreme Court advocates natural law, because it doesn't. But there are some things that are so absurd. But within the jurisdiction of Tennessee, for example, where this law arose, if Dr. King had been a police officer in Tennessee, then he could not have carried out that provision, even though that was the law in Tennessee, because that would not have squared with his conscience.
I see.
You see, while on the other hand, there are people who believe that morality only impedes law and undermines it, and that people have a responsibility to obey all laws because they have been enunciated by a sovereign of men that have been delegated that authority from the people. And that is the situation with Rudolph Giuliani, who, believes in that concept. The danger of it is that Adolf Hitler also believed in that same theological and philosophical basis.
It sounds exactly like that. Let's take a break. You've set a fantastic foundation for us. We'll come right back.
But, in fact, Mr. Brown and I really, this came up because of the conversation Mr. Brown and I had earlier. But it really goes back to the point that you make when you want to talk about Yahweh being Yahweh.
Yeah.
And I have a particular theory of that, in which actually I somewhat expanded on that with Mr. Brown, because he called me one day and he was saying that we are a nation within a nation.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, that's true, but it's more than that.
Okay.
And I point out, though, that giving deference to that concept, that had been not initial, I don't know whether initially not stated, but in the book, The Condition by Martin Delaney, he stated that, which about 150 years ago, that we were a nation in a nation.
Hold on one second.
In a nation within a nation. The United States is also incorrectly called that. It should be called the United Nations of America. Because what you really have in this country are nations operating under the umbrella of America.
Okay.
So in other words, for example, the truest example of that would be the whole tribal sovereignty of
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
All right.
Okay.
You see, that would be the truest example.
I got
you. Start from that.
Right. Okay. Yes.
That can't be denied.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But then once you proceed from that, knowing that if they were given certain sovereignty rights, that people like the Mormons would also have to be given certain sovereignty rights. That the Catholic Church is already a sovereign. With its headquarters in Vatican City, recognized by more than 100 other nations as a political entity. That the Hasidim in Brooklyn is also another nation, and that these nations are operating under the umbrella. So so America is more than that. So therefore, it's interesting that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, "This is the nation of Islam," and Yahweh being Yahweh said, "This is the nation of Yahweh." You see, implicit in that, it must have been their understanding that this was a country that allowed for nations to assemble under its umbrella.
Very deep.
You see, and so therefore you go into the whole issue of sovereignty.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand.
Right,
yes.
You come out, of that. So it's a very interesting discussion.
Let's bring it in.
Right.
Let's bring it in.
Right.
Let's bring it in. Because it's interesting that you mentioned this, because this sovereignty issue is the issue of this patriot movement.
Right, yes, absolutely.
That ties into the Republican thrust that they're doing.
But going back to that, though, when the Black Panthers said power to the people, that's what they were talking about, popular sovereignty.
Oh, goodness.
You see, and it's everybody who has used sovereignty in some form of them had to be eliminated, especially if they were black, because the one nation you can't have in America is a black nation.
Should be their priority.
That's deep.
See, you have all the other nations, but you can't have a black nation.
I see exactly.
Because a black nation would be antagonistic to the scheme of things out of their own historical experience.
Absolutely. And even look at the population.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Who has any population?
Right.
Spread and comparable to our population.
Right.
Oh, no. You're right. That's impossible.
That's impossible.
Yeah, and it's what's interesting about what you're saying concerning Dr. King that occurs to me. I remember, and I read this the other day, reviewing Dr. King's life. At one point when he was being introduced at the March on Washington, that they referred to him as the president of the Negroes of America.
Right.
Somebody referred to him as this. And when they said it, I said, that's right at the edge. And what you said about him being taken out?
Right. There you go. You got it.
Yeah.
The whole fear.
Yeah.
You see, that he would, at one point, acknowledge that. Because, see, the other thing about it is, and I brought this here, the Declaration of Independence. See, this was a document that he believed in. But he was to the point where Jefferson was when he wrote it. When he said...
Hold on, we got to get this in here. We're back with you inside of the GBE Radio Magazine at WLIB 1190 AM. Well, you've often heard me mention the fact that when I do this particular show, there are a lot of different perks that come with the show. I mean, of course, I get free cakes and pastries and cookies and all those kind of things. But one of the major perks that I get in the show is that I get a chance to talk to the guests during the break while the commercials are going on. And let me the Daily Challenge. It was called The Case of the Century, Yahweh Ben Yahweh's federal appeal being dismissed. This is Georgia's 11th Circuit Court of Appeals that rejected religious leader Yahweh Ben Yahweh's request for his 1992 conspiracy conviction to be overturned. Reportedly, the court affirmed the convictions of the Nation of Yahweh leader and 6 of his followers with little or no comment on January 5th. Now, Attorney Maddox, this fits into our conversation in some ways. I thought it would fit, but not as deeply as you've described it. I'd like you to talk about it for a moment.
Well, actually, it really, this particular conversation really rose in a conversation that Minister Brown and I had on an earlier occasion. When Minister Brown, in this conversation, referred to black people in this country as a nation within a nation. And I agree with that, but I informed him, but it was actually deeper than that. One, you have to agree with it because this was an assessment that Martin Delaney made in his book in about 1850 or so, called The Condition, where he actually described us as a nation within a nation. So we've heard this repeatedly by a lot of people, that we are a nation within a nation. Well, he was certainly one of the earlier proponents of that notion, and he derived that from the notion that we were unable to gain any political equality within this country, and therefore nobody fit that description more than our people. But what I told Mr. Brown at that point was that it would be fatal if we left it at only we were a nation within a nation. We also must recognize that the United States of America is a misnomer because in effect it is really the United Nations of America. That this particular country from its beginning recognized the fact that nations could coexist, not just states out of 13 colonies, but nations. And the first recognition of that, that nobody can disagree with, is the fact that the indigenous people were given certain tribal sovereignties through treaties and things of that nature. You don't enter into treaties with people who are part of you. Treaties are entered in between two states, so to speak, in terms of international law. And so therefore we know that the fact that the indigenous people were able to have some semblance of sovereignty, even though that's questionable, you know, in terms of how they've been able to enjoy it, but we do know that. I mean, even up to the present time, the fact that gambling takes place on their grounds out of tribal sovereignty, the fact that there have been many whites who have been employed by these gambling casinos who've sued on civil rights grounds and have been told that they had no suits because these were tribal sovereignties in that nature. So we know
they are literally in another country, so to speak,
right, so
when they're there on the reservation.
Right. And so that extension really also applies to a lot of other people, like the Mormons is a nation within a nation. The Catholic Church is already recognized as one of the political entities because of its status in Vatican City as a nation, its membership in the UN and other, and its diplomatic immunity that it enjoys. And then you have the Mormon Church that is also a sovereignty until itself out in Utah. So these sovereignties really exist under one umbrella. Now, what is interesting is, and a lot of people didn't necessarily comment on this, why did the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, for example, call it the Nation of Islam? You see, and in my opinion, he had to recognize the fact of him forming a theocracy and a government that may not necessarily be able to function ultimately within the confines of the United Nations of America, and therefore 5 separate states were demanded, but a government nonetheless. And then you had Yahweh Ben Yahweh, who came and formed the Nation of Yahweh, also a recognition of the development of a government for black people. Now, the problem is that while other people have been able to enjoy this nationhood status in America, whites find it inconceivable for there to be a black nation, I mean, in this country. And therefore, people who have recognized the concept of sovereignty, going back to the Honorable Marcus Garvey, who recognized that even though he called it UNIA, but he was building a government nonetheless. And then the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was in prison, and then the Yahweh Ben Yahweh, who is now in prison. And then you go even to the Black Panther Party, because when the Black Panther Party talks about power to the people, they're actually talking about popular sovereignty, you see, which is a concept that has been fought over for the last 200 years. George Wallace was shot because of his notion of sovereignty. You see, the right of the people of a territory, Alabama, to be the ultimate arbiters of how black folks are treated. That was his notion.
I'm glad you mentioned this, because I wanted to hear your comments about this federal versus state dynamic which you're bringing in now. Stretch that to other states in the South and give us some sense of what those states were saying, for example, in the quote-unquote civil rights era about their sovereignty.
Yeah, well, you know, actually, going back really to the Civil War itself, the Civil War was fought over sovereignty because you actually had two nations coexisting at the same time. You had the nations of the South and you had the North, because they had two different cultures. One was an agricultural economy, the one was an industrial economy. And there was a whole question of who would regulate the other. They were seen as a different, two accents. They were seen as two different nations. So the war was not fought over slavery. As a matter of fact, the Union could not have been fighting over slavery, because at the time they was conducting the war, the U.S. Constitution sanctioned slavery. So you couldn't be fighting something that your Constitution already sanctioned. So it really has something to do with the whole question of sovereignty and how men conduct their affairs. Now, sovereignty also, really, when you're talking about sovereignty to some extent, you can't forget the indigenous people, because much of what this country learned in terms of the natural rights of man came from the indigenous people, because they had no model in Europe, because there were monarchies in Europe and everybody was a subject.
What do you mean when you say the natural rights of man?
Well, basically, when the Europeans came here and they began to see the political institutions of the indigenous people, what they recognized was that those institutions was not coercive. I mean, you did not have magistrates and judges. You did not have jails and prisons and things of that nature. And it was a respect for every person's right. You didn't have poverty. You didn't have a clash over property or any of those things. You had total enjoyment of people. The Europeans had come from a land where there was a lot of poverty, a lot of famine, a lot of starvation, a lot of those things. So they began to admire that. But they had no model themselves in terms of it. And so they used that model of the indigenous people in terms of recognizing that every man has rights that are endowed to him, and that those rights continue to exist until that man believes that it is more important that some of those rights are granted to a trustee, so to speak, in trust to protect the common good of all people. You know what I mean? It's like if we playing basketball, you playing basketball, we can play basketball, but at some point we say, hey man, we may do this better, we had a referee. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah,
so, you know, it doesn't start when playing basketball, but we get a right to make decisions on whether we foul to somebody else other than us.
I see.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But we have certain rights within ourselves, all right? Well, it was that basis from which the Declaration of Independence was written.
Hold on to that point, and I know that you have some thoughts about Dr. King and his perspective on this document as well. We'll come back. Attorney Alton Maddox is with us in the GBE. I see some of your telephone calls beginning to come in. You know how the format works. You're right. You can join the conversation at 212-889-1190. 212-889-1190. Attorney Alton Maddox. Our theme is Understanding Your Power Under the Law, a tribute to a king. The GBE Radio Magazine continues right after news coming up. I'm messing with this now.
Right. Right.
I hear exactly what you're doing.
Right.
Seriously.
Right. Yeah, real serious.
I read something the other day that was wild. They were saying that in one of the states out west, I don't remember if it was Nevada, Iowa, one of those states out there, they were saying that IRS agents don't even bring jury trials in this particular state because the state population is so conscious of sovereignty that they can't win the cases?
Yeah, well, you see, also, there's another reason for that, too.
Tell me.
You see,
Hold on.
the roof, you see, the Hayes Tilden Compromise. Well, you see, it was around that time that there was an act called the Posse Comitatus Act of 1875. And what it did was, and it was enacted because it was to prevent standing armies in the South. Okay?
Okay.
Because you see, even going back to the formation of the U.S. Constitution, there was always a fear of a standing army, you know, and the dangers that it posed to a free people.
Right.
All right. So then when you had the military intervention in the South got Congress to pass the Posse Comitatus Act of 1875, which made the sheriff the highest ranking official in the county. You see, and so therefore, when a federal agent comes into that county, they're coming in illegally. So now, what these militiamen have done is going back to that particular act, you see, and said, hey, this is it. Because, see, when the compromise was given in 1877 for Hayes, you know, to become president, well, what happened is that the parties agreed at that time that they would not pass any more civil rights acts. And they didn't until 1957.
Okay.
All right? And that there would be no further federal intervention into the affairs of the states. And that didn't happen again until 1957 when he sent the troops into Arkansas.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
See,
I do. And then we have a misnomer on our behalf as people that civil rights acts are occurring in the late 50s and early 60s.
Right.
And we can go back 100 years before that and find civil rights acts.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because see, with the Act of 1866 and then the Act of 1875, the Act of 1866 allowed for people to enter the contracts and to buy property. Then the Act of 1875 was the Public Accommodations Act. Was ruled unconstitutional. And once that act, around the time that act was ruled unconstitutional, then Tennessee became the first state to enact Jim Crow law. And then they started boomeranging. And then you got to a case called Plessy versus Ferguson, which dealt with that, you know, in terms of public transportation.
Yeah, now that's an interesting thing. Jim Crow laws.
Right.
Because it's not just a Jim Crow attitude.
Right, yeah.
It's not just a Jim Crow philosophy.
Right, yeah.
It's a Jim Crow law.
Right. And see, what happened was, see, there was a guy by the name of Rice, a white guy in Cincinnati, who, I think it was Dan Rice, who saw some blacks, children singing some song around the line of Jim Crow. You know, with some song that blacks had at that time.
Yeah.
And so he picked up that and went into a minstrel show act. You know, to degrade black people.
I remember reading that.
Right,
I
you
remember
see,
reading it.
right, and so then as a result of that, these laws were meant to degrade.
Jesus Christ. Oh, man. Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
It's a deep stuff.
The thing about it, though, and I know that it's some of what you referred to in your conversation is, this is the philosophical foundation of the country.
Right.
So when we really look at it, when we talk, they talk about the Republicans and what the Republicans are doing, they're really trying to go back to the foundation.
Right, yeah. In fact, I'm going to tell you what they're trying to do.
Okay.
It's worse than that.
All right, go ahead.
They're trying to go past, beyond the foundation.
Oh, Lord. Here we go.
All right. I'll give you an example.
All right.
Let's look at the slave codes.
Yeah, fine. Okay, good.
Now, the slave code denied basically all rights. But what it did guarantee, it guaranteed you food, clothing, and shelter.
All right, okay.
And it fined a master who refused to give those.
I've read that, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Now, Gendrich is going beyond that. He's not guaranteed to give
the president can't even have TV.
Well, in fact, you know,
they can't have nothing.
Let me go back and show you this. You know, have you ever heard of the sumptuary laws?
No.
Well, see,
what is this now?
Sumptuary laws.
Sumptuary laws.
Sumptuary.
Okay.
Okay. Now, those laws were enacted to make sure that slaves or enslaved people never exhibited a luxurious station in life, which means that they were penalized if their shoes were a little bit too modern, or they're over, you know, their suit, or they had a suit on or something like that, and couldn't explain why they had it on.
Jesus.
Right. You know.
Ooh.
Or riding in a carriage
wait a
or a
minute.
horse. Right.
These were laws in what states? What states?
And all over the South. The sumptuary laws.
I'll be damned.
That's the reason why blacks in the South, even in the 1950s and 40s, even they had a lot of money, they wouldn't buy a Cadillac. That's the reason why we came here. The first thing we wanted was a hog. Right? Right? You know what I mean?
And some shoes.
Right, and some shoes.
And a brand new suit.
Right, absolutely. Right. Yeah. No, serious.
Oh,
right.
Goodness. Oh, here we go. I got to get all of this in the air here.
The Duke of Ellington.
We're back with you inside of the GBE radio magazine at WLIB 1190 AM. Boy, y'all just don't know. I'm telling you. I'm glad Mr. Proud is here today. I'm serious. Y'all who are watching this will certainly know. Attorney Alton Maddox is with us. Our theme is Understanding Your Power Under the Law, a tribute to a king. We are taking a look at the dynamics of so-called man-made laws versus natural laws. Attorney Maddox is giving us some very, very wonderful insight into this particular subject, and some new insights that are about to come your way right now inside of the GBE. I know that there are a couple of you who are standing by with your telephone calls. I did say that you'd have a chance to talk to Attorney Maddox, 212-889-1190. We have a lot of ground to cover in a short time to do it, so I'm going to get right to your telephone calls and come right back with Attorney Maddox to talk a bit more about some areas that he's going to expand on, starting from the Declaration of Independence. Thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Shalom, brother. Imhotep.
Yes, sir, brother. Good morning.
Shalom to Attorney Maddox.
Shalom, brother.
This is Brother Onan Israel, Nation of Yahweh.
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
brother, perfect. Good to have you with us.
Yes, sir. I'd just like to show my appreciation to WLIB for keeping Yahweh Ben Yahweh's situation in the eyes and ears of the brothers and sisters. And I'd also like to show my appreciation to Attorney Maddox for such an illuminating observation that he has made.
Yes.
Which shows that he has spent a lot of time observing the peculiar nuances of this case, and especially with regard to the topic that you're talking about of man-made law versus natural law. We, in spite of the setbacks that we've received from these decisions, will go on in pursuit of natural law because we know that we are just in our cause. Absolutely. And also, I'd just like to say, with relationship to the federal powers that the federal government use, in particular the RICO statutes, and also the 1984 Bail Reform Act, in which they used to incarcerate Yahweh Ben Yahweh without any evidence, without any opportunity for bail, and just basically violating all constitutional provisions that are laid out. But with regard to the RICO statutes, they are now using this as a financial weapon against any organizations that choose to go against the status quo. It is their tool to use the economic weapon to drain the resources, because they are currently using it with the Right to Life movement. They've used it in the case of Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, and they will continue to use it in something that I fear that in the case of the situation with the store in Harlem, I can see a scenario where, you know, they can turn this into some sort of a racketeering type of situation.
Let's get Attorney Maddox's comments on these points, which I think are excellent, brother, and thank you for the call once again. Attorney Maddox.
Well, I think, one, when you talk about RICO, let us understand that that particular act is designed to the First Amendment, threaten First Amendment rights, and that is rights of group associations and the right to creative thinking, because what we see now in this city particularly is that you have to watch your language, which is a aspect of the black codes and the slave codes, because at that particular time you had to show all etiquette toward white people and impose no slander, or so to speak, or any kind of ill will or ill speaking towards them. And so now we're beginning to see in this particular city, for example, the authorities demanding that leaders tone down what they call their rhetoric, which basically means show more respect toward white people and do as you're told. Now, once you engage in that, it cuts down on your ability to think, because, see, language has a definite relationship to the thought process, which is why we went back to the whole notion of seeing this country as the United Nations of America. You begin to see different realities than by calling it the United States of America. You know, even some people call it the United Snakes of America, but nonetheless, either way you call it, it still falls short of really recognizing what it is and therefore making some rational decision upon it. But going back to Rico, it is no question again that the fear in this country is black folks forming government. You see, and that is the one notion that we really have never seriously entertained as a wide umbrella of people. I mean, there have been certain segments of our population have dealt with it, but the idea of us forming a government is something that cannot be tolerated, and it is for this reason that this statute has come into existence, you see, to stifle that type of growth that is necessary for us as a people, because the whole 20th century was really towards our prophets coming forward and saying that there's a need for us to form our own government to protect our own interests, even to the point of going to the United Nations, for example. The only way that we can legitimately go to the United Nations is as a government. And once that government is formed, once we have our constitutional convention, once we make our declaration of independence, you see, then we can apply for formal recognition by many of the states themselves. Because you got to realize that Vatican City is a part of the UN with less than 110 acres of land. You see, so we sometimes get confused by this whole land question, when land is not really the basis for the formation of the government, but it's only the extension of the rights by owning land and then being exercised those sovereign rights through land. You
mentioned the Declaration of Independence, and to the callers, I'm coming to you in a moment, but you mentioned the Declaration of Independence, and during the break, you were saying that Dr. King had some perspectives about this that were evolving. I'd like you to share some.
Well, I think one is that I think the thesis that was put forward by Kwame Ture probably says it best. When Kwame Ture has mentioned about the moral dimensions of Dr. King, and the fact that Dr. King was one who could look at an argument, and once he recognized the rationality of that argument, could pursue it as he did with the war in Vietnam. Because let us understand that when he made the October 4th statement at Riverside Church 1 year before he was assassinated on October 4th, this is October 4th, 1967, then 1 year later to the date, he was assassinated, you know, which raised a symbol as to why. That was a very bold act on his part to be able to make that denouncement, because many people in this country, believe me, did not share that view in terms of making that public pronouncement. But Dr. King had listened to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and listened to other young people, you know, who saw an immorality in that war, and it raised contradictions that Dr. King could not reconcile. And so, therefore, Dr. King felt morally obligated, you know, to make the pronouncement that he actually made. Well, this was an evolving man.
Now you bring up another point. I think that day was April 4th, I think, but you bring up another point now that you said this.
Right.
It's Dr. King's analysis about questioning whether we were integrating into a burning house.
Right. Right. Yeah. You see, and so therefore, he was moving toward what you had earlier said, maybe off the air, about being announced as a president of the Negro people at the March on Washington. You see, and in a real sense, that was the fear of J. Edgar Hoover, because we talking about of the people, for the people, and by the people. We talking about a government. You know, you start talking about the president of the people.
Right,
you know, and the fact that they may move into some form of structure. All right, and he was a charismatic type of person that could have taken us to that structure. That became a real fear, because Dr. King himself believed the words of the Declaration of Independence, even though they were written by a slaveholder, Thomas Jefferson, but there were certain statements about what he said were absolutely true, whoever wrote it.
That's
you know?
right. Yeah.
I mean, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Absolutely.
And endow with certain unalienable rights, among them life, living, pursuit of happiness. I mean, that starts with a major broad thesis in terms of something that Dr. King could reconcile as natural law, because that's what they were basically using as their major premise to come to that conclusion. And through the rationale that Jefferson posed, he then began to talk about the popular sovereignty of the people and what happens when the failure of government happens and the promises that were supposed to be given to the people are now breached. And so it's in that sense that a lot of people remember the Declaration of Independence stating, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, eventually a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. Well, see, that's what he's talking about, popular sovereignty. That's what the Black Panther Party was talking about when they said power to the people. So this has been a concept that has been amongst us, although it may not necessarily have been a popular concept, necessarily pronounced by a lot of us, but nonetheless, that concept has existed in our community.
Let me take a quick break. We've got many of you standing by the telephone lines. We'll come back to you on the phones. We'll come back to more of Attorney Alton Maddox. I'm going to take a look at something that Attorney Maddox will introduce us to called the sumptuary laws that will blow your mind when we come back after this in the Global Black Experience. Gosh, I mean, and I'm hearing the FBI doctrine that says that no black Messiah should rise. Right, and here King is in a position where he's actually changing and adjusting the laws of the United States. And then with a Poor People's March that's going to cross him over into other groups.
No, it was time, you know, from their point of view. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was out of here.
You know, he was definitely out of here at that point, you know, because he was taking a large body of people with him, you see.
Yeah.
And now he was really striking at the black masses.
Right.
You know what I mean? In a very deep way. You know, he's raising these questions about the functions of government. You know?
And the issues of poverty that
were
across the board.
You see?
Because the poor whites in Appalachia know they poor.
Absolutely. You know what I mean?
They do know they poor.
They know they poor. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You know, and you know, actually, if Dr. King had been on the scene now, you know, with everybody losing their job, I mean, he would have really created a story.
Oh my goodness.
You know what I mean?
It's true.
You know, if he had been here now, I mean, the conditions, you know, were not as ripe as he would have, you know, loved them, you know.
Isn't that interesting? And the moral foundation of the law actually was an expression of his own philosophy. So here he was, best suited to represent that moral dimension of the foundation of the United States. That they were in violation of. My goodness. Yeah, he had to go.
Well, you know, I tell you, Imhotep, you know, you have to be thanked as well, because I woke up this morning, I said, you know, this brother don't really know what he's doing. He invited me on this program to discuss this area. I said, you know, this is divine intervention. You know what I mean?
Yes, it is, brother. Well, I tell you, you remember you were on when I said it was December or whatever it was. And I've been running into this sovereignty information. And it's been blowing my mind. And then you came on the air, and you said a couple of things, and I said, Alton is the one to come in and elaborate on this piece. Because I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. When you mention the Mormons even. People don't understand the Mormons and that state.
Absolutely.
You walk into that state, you on another planet.
You're on another planet.
I got a brother who went there, he said, Byrd, he said, it's another planet.
Are you serious?
Yeah, he said, Byrd, he said, it's another planet out here, man. He said, you don't understand. He said, I've traveled all over the country. He said, but there ain't no state like this one. He said, this state has got all. He said, man, he said, you look around. You said, where is the porno shops? And man, not here. He said, they don't play that. He said, you got to suddenly say, well, how come all of these people can't get into this state? Because they got that state. The Mormons got that state.
And as a nation.
I'm telling you. It's their state.
You know what I mean?
Sure it is.
You know, with foreign policy, you know, relating to nations all over the world.
Absolutely.
A whole bit.
I went to Miami Airport about a month ago. And I haven't been to Miami. Oh my goodness.
No.
Oh, wait a minute now. This is getting a little too heavy now.
Too serious. You're too legal. He's a lawyer now.
Let me come over here.
I mean, he's erudite.
Oh, goodness. Oh, brother. Good to see you.
I mean, he's so clear. Erudite.
Oh, man.
Show his training. And where's that box? This love fest. Usually I had even take my radio to listen to this. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it's some serious stuff. It's some serious stuff. It really is. And we were just talking about, I was telling Attorney Maddox, I said it was like last November, December. I'm going through a lot of this information on sovereignty. And as I'm going through all of this, I'm putting together, oh, this is what these white boys are doing. And this is why they blowing up everything. And I'm getting all this, but their sovereignty argument is a deep argument. So I'm like thinking about it, and I have Attorney Maddox on for something completely different. And he said something, and I said, this is the person to take us into this conversation. Okay? And I mean, it's what you opening up here is.
Last night, the story of his life, and how, and you can see what he's dealing with, and this question of sovereignty.
Absolutely.
They're taking control. He's been thinking about this for 25 years.
Exactly. We're back with you inside of the GBE Radio Magazine at WLIB 1190 AM. Well, Attorney Alton Maddox is with us, attorney at war, president of the United African Movement. We're talking on our theme for the month, A Tribute to a King, Understanding Your Power Under the Law. Dynamics, of course, so-called man-made law and the natural laws of God. Well, we have a special, I can't say guest, he's a member of our family who has just walked into the studio and brought a whole other dimension of energy, and he was clutching his radio, so he's been listening all the time. I'm talking about Nana Dr. Leonard Jeffries with us today in The Experience. Nana Hotep, good morning.
Hotep, Imhotep, and Hotep attorney.
Hotep, brother.
I had to bust up this love fest. This was so I mean, I rushed down here. I took my helicopter. This intellectual and this legal dimension. I mean, I just had to experience.
Yes, sir.
And I'm glad that our family has experienced the talent that the brother has.
Absolutely.
And the reason why he has been under such an attack is because he not only has the spirit of our people in his heart,
yes,
but he has this intellectual grasp and the courage to be able to bring it out clearly.
Yes.
So we need to continue to give him this type of forum and others, so he can bring us up to really what is happening. Because
absolutely.
we cannot leave our struggle on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial talking about a dream. We're talking about a legacy of resistance to oppression. We're talking about an intellectual ability to understand our oppression and to raise it to the highest level. So I'm certainly glad to be here just to let you all know that I'm alive and well. We'll be at the Slave Theater tonight,
Attorney Maddox,
raising hell.
Tell us a bit about this experience coming up tonight.
Well, you know, actually, we checked his birth certificate and found out that Leola, his mother, has a birthday this week.
Yes.
which is the 19th, as a matter of fact. But since we only meet on Wednesdays, you know, we said, well, this has to be a week for Dr. Jeffries because, one, we do honor all persons during the month of their mother's birthday.
Yes.
You know, and for people who don't understand what I'm talking about, they have to listen to Dr. Ben, you know.
Absolutely.
Because this is his teachings. But beyond that, the fact that we do want to honor him because we are really very pleased that someone like him is in our midst.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times we take people for granted.
Oh,
you
that's
know,
true.
Because it takes all of us really to make this a whole. And certainly Dr. Jeffries has been one of those, and we always want to continue to inspire him. So we have a special gift for him tonight. In addition to the fact that he's going to make his presentation, we have a special gift that we will be presenting to him this evening that will improve his effectiveness in the black community.
I already probably know what that is.
You know,
something to do with time.
Which is guaranteed.
Yes, sir.
To improve his effectiveness.
Yes.
So we absolutely want to make sure that he was here this week.
Understood.
You know, so
understood.
When we start looking at the year, you know, we say, hey, the 17th has to be his day. Because on the other hand, too, this day is very special to me because this is my father's birthday as well.
Beautiful.
So,
beautiful.
you know, and I had to share that early with him.
Oh, brother, please wish him happy birthday for
Certainly
us.
I will.
Absolutely,
So,
goodness.
you know, the 17th is very special.
All right, that's tonight, the Slave
Right.
Theater. Let's bring in some of your telephone calls right now. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for holding on. You're in the GBE with attorney Alton Maddox. Hotep, good morning.
Oh, I'm on?
Yes, you are.
Oh, all right. Gary, it's always a pleasure to hear you, and I just want to tell you something. You are something else to have those two giants on there today. It's just a thrill for me out here, and I'm sort of lost for words except to tell them both to keep it up. But let me tell you something. If we had 50 men like Alton Maddox and Professor Jeffries, more like yourself, this thing would be over with. But we got to get busy now and put the talking aside. And I don't mean the talking on your program.
Yes.
I'm just speaking about that talking that we do to ourselves on the inside, if I'm making sense. And get the job done. Because I want to tell you something. You're right on time with that, Giuliani. That man is insane and he should be impeached. But I'm getting out of here. Just keep up the good work because everybody's listening to you, whether you realize it or not.
We appreciate you, brother. God bless now. You're in the GBE Radio Magazine. Go right ahead, please. Yes, good morning. Go right ahead. Yes, good morning.
Hello. I'm Vicky Garvin, and I'm calling from Jamaica, Queens.
Okay.
And I want to say hi to brothers Gary and Alton and Len Jeffries.
Good
Thank
morning,
you very
sister.
much.
Hotep.
Good
Good morning.
I'm a long-time supporter of all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sister.
I've been an activist for many years. I'm an 80-year-old senior citizen in poor health, unable to travel by public transportation alone to various meetings. And I want to inquire whether a copy of the remarks of Attorney Maddox will be available.
We can certainly go about doing that, sister.
Well,
As a matter of fact, let me clarify. It's being documented as we speak by Transatlantic Productions. Minister Clemson Brown has been videoing this series as we go along.
well, I'm happy to hear that. And I also wanted to ask Attorney Maddox whether he has any program, brochure, which is, you know, lists tapes that are on sale at the Slave Theater. If I can't personally get there to, you know, to participate or at least to learn,
Great question, sister. Thank you.
I would like to know.
Let's have him respond to that question. Please hang up and listen.
Well, two things. One, Imhotep, hopefully she might be able to call us because, you know, despite the fact that we have a lot of budgetary problems, there are a lot of people who would like to come to the Slave Theater. And, you know, we have to try to find a way to make sure that those persons have access. And so I'm going to take it upon myself for her to call the office 718-834-9034. That's 718-834-9034 to try to see can we pair her with someone who's coming out of Queens, because people do come from the various boroughs, and we may be able to work that out for her, especially in terms of this evening. Secondly, Transatlantic Productions does all of the video recording, and they do have a complete list of all of the speakers who've spoken at the Slave Theater. And again, that number can be used in order to secure that list, and that's 718-834-9034.
I'm going to try to work something out. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I have to do this time management thing here, but I'm going to break for news, and we have a special guest who is coming up in our next hour. She is an author who has a book, rather interesting book that you heard me talk about earlier this morning. It's described as a deadly courtroom battle becoming a real-life nightmare for two women, both lawyers, one black and one passing for white. It's called When We Practice to Deceive. Her name is Gloria Millette, and she'll join us in our next hour inside of the GBE, but I'm going to ask Attorney Maddox to stay over to take a few more of your telephone calls in the process along with Donna Jeffries. We'll return in just a few moments inside of the GBE Radio Magazine at WLIB. Our theme, Understanding Your Power Under the Law, a tribute to a king.
Thomas de Kaiser from Clerk and Army Reserves. Get to travel, meet new people. Army
And Vicky
Reserve
is,
It's not just an attitude that's embedded in people. It's embedded in the legal system itself. I mean, in other words, it's one thing to feel like this.
Right, sure, right.
But then you make a law.
Right, that's
Yeah,
you know.
that's a completely different level of consciousness. You know, because you can say, well, I hate this person, I don't like these kind of people.
Right.
But when you actually sit down and write up legislation,
Right.
that's a
Right.
sick mentality.
Right.
Whoa, that's
It
a
is.
sick mentality.
Right.
and when you have the most significant articulator of the American way, Thomas Jefferson articulating his concepts of beauty and negativity, and in reference to black people as well. So, you know, and he's their leading philosopher of what they are supposed to be all about.
Yeah, that's right.
TJ.
Yeah, that's right.
Then next week, you're going to have to deal with the civil rights struggle versus the human rights struggle. And Malcolm's the mention to this thing. So let him run it next week.
Yeah, well, you see where it's going. It's been kicking it right in. It's been kicking it right in. And I, you know, I thought it was funny to you, this thing. What did Giuliani do? He apparently told the workers not to come to work, and then
right. And he's gonna get a big pay with this level. All the city council.
You see, but today, Alton put this thing in real perspective, because there's a mean-spiritedness that you see in Giuliani, and you saw it in him as a prosecutor. But Alton today presented a picture that he's operating without a moral compass in the law. I mean, that's who he is. That's exactly who he is.
And that's how I left law school. After 1 year in NYU Law School, I was the only black person in the day section. I'm looking for some morality in the laws, and the people told me it is not there. You are in the wrong. Dr. Mueller, Professor Mueller. You are looking for you talking about criminality and looking for the moral. No, there is not there. We even got laws on the books not to have sexual relations with birds and stuff like that. All that stuff was still on the book. The moral compass, as you said, is not there. Giuliani operates. That's why he can be so distant and so ruthless.
Absolutely.
Because there's a philosophical thing.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. There's a philosophical thing. When you see King, you got to see philosophy.
That's right.
You just can't see him dreaming.
Exactly.
And then you have to see that philosophy expand and interact. You know, that's why. Oh, correct the date. April the 4th.
I said April 4th. Oh, I did correct.
What did I say? You got so
October.
You said October.
Yeah, I can.
White section, and it was not fair for me, even though the passenger who boarded the bus did not ask for a seat. The bus driver did not want to see one white person standing.
GBE Radio Magazine at WLIB, Sister Rosa Parks bringing us back, and of course that dimension quite recent, as a matter of fact, in the 1950s in relationship to the issues that led to the Montgomery bus boycott, but surrounded by a host of laws. As you have been hearing Attorney Alton Maddox comment, we're theming our program Understanding Your Power Under the Law, a tribute to a king. Attorney Maddox is joining us. He is our guide through this particular matrix of law that we move through, so-called man-made law and the natural laws of God. We're joined today by Nana Leonard Jeffries, who's going to be appearing tonight at the Slave Theater, and a special tribute as well. Attorney Maddox, before I go any further, we're going to go right to the calls as well, but I want you to comment about something you were talking to us off the air about in the last section of the GBE, the sumptuary laws. What were they?
Well, you know, one of the things hopefully we're going to talk about over the next 2 weeks is just how regulated this society is and where Newt Gingrich intends to try to take us back to. But the sumptuary laws were laws that were enacted, particularly that related to black people, where their clothing and their attire and their lifestyles were regulated, even to the extent that if you wore something that looked too new or too fine, you could be criminalized for that. So it was not only in terms of your conduct, but in terms of the way that you appeared. Now, you know what's so interesting about that is that I started law school at the University of Georgia in the late 1960s. And there was a brother who had preceded me and who now sits on the Georgia Supreme Court. But when he first came to the University of Georgia, one of the white students came up to him, and this was around 1967 or 68, came up to him and said, look, I just cannot stand the way that you dress. You know, it just bothers me to see a Negro wearing a suit and tie every day. That bothers me. And where I'm from, we don't allow that. the county that I'm from does not allow that unless you're a preacher, and you are not a preacher. And told him that it bothered him so that he was prepared to pay for the rest of his law school education if he got out of those clothes. Because that was just something that never existed in his way of life. And see, these laws have been carried down through the books. This is why when a lot of times when black people left the South and they came up here, the first thing they wanted to do was to get a Cadillac, many of them, or a fur, or if they didn't get that, they rented one and came back to the South as a means of rebellion or defiance.
Shark skin suits,
whatever. Suits,
yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All of that happened. I mean, I can remember in the 1960s that a person from Queens County, New York, was driving through my home county in a Cadillac with New York plates on it, and he was run off of the road and was left paralyzed and had to be hospitalized in my hometown. And my father and my mother kept his family because, you know, at that particular time it was hard for them to find accommodations, and they stayed there in Georgia for many months only because he was riding through Georgia in a Cadillac with New York plates on it.
Not a Jeffers.
Well, I think we have to understand how serious is this pathology.
Yes.
Right. You see, when I was talking about the curriculum struggle, we said what we have discovered is that there is a racial pathology, a sickness, and it reflects itself in the culture. So when the people who are designing the culture began to put together the laws and began to put together the policies and the practices, they built this sickness in, and we have to see it for what it is.
Absolutely.
A pathological sickness, and even though they may manifest it in a straight face like Giuliani, but it's still there, and it's still very deep.
You're inside of the GBE Radio Magazine. I want to get to as many of your calls as we can in the time remaining before we move to our next segment. You're in the air. Go right ahead, please. Good afternoon.
Gary, this is Roy from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
To your brother.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is Roy. How are you?
Good, brother. Thanks.
Okay. I just want to say you must extend this team.
Thank you, brother.
We have today's second class.
Yes.
You must have Madam teachings on more often.
Absolutely. Well, you know, he's on with us all month. I want you to know that.
Okay,
That's the schedule.
Has to be regular.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank
Appreciate you, brother. You're in the GBE Radio Magazine. Good afternoon.
I just had to, I'm on the air?
Yes, you are, sister.
Yeah. I'm from New Jersey. And I just had to call and, extend, what I have to extend, because you have the on time, people. Because I don't have to ask you if you remember that song, Slavery is Back in Effect.
You know I do. You know I do.
Another thing, I wanted to, the people that you got to the transatlantic production.
Yes.
I tell you, they are on the money. You know why? Because now, I know they went to the Million Man March. They filmed, because I had to film.
All right.
Yeah. So I know they had to be there.
They were there. No question. And as you see, they're here too.
And I tell you, you know what happened? The first time I ordered the thing, it got lost. The tape,
Yes.
somehow it got lost in the mail.
Yes.
I never received it because I sent the Federal Express. They remembered me. When I went to Kwanzaa, I saw them, and they passed out the paper. And
Okay.
I was telling them, I said, now, I never received, my stuff, because when I pay for something, I want to receive it.
Of course you do.
So he said, well, give me your number. I left my number, my address, everything. He said, somebody will be getting back with you.
Sister, I got to jump in because the time's going to run past us.
Oh, and the next day, he called me and he sent it in 3 days. He said he was going to send it priority mail.
And you got it. So that's the way it should be. That's the way it's got to be. Transatlantic is on the case. And as I say, they're recording this series that we're doing with Attorney Maddox all month. Let me squeeze this last caller in. Go right ahead, please.
Boy, I'd like to ask one for Madam. I have some old clothes that I want to donate to the homeless.
Okay.
I want to know, can I do that through your organization?
Yes, you can, because we do have a relationship with many of the shelters.
Okay.
And you can certainly bring it down to the Slave Theater any Wednesday evening. And anyone else who would like to do that, and I think it's definitely a very decent gesture. And in fact, it's good that you brought that up because I have a whole pile at home myself.
You know something, and I do too.
Make no donations.
Absolutely.
I'll be bringing some tonight.
I'll get some down to you too, Alton. That's good. Okay, so next week, for those of you listening, we will deal with that very issue that Attorney Maddox is talking about here in terms of where we are seeing this particular society going and where Newt is trying to take it. We'll start with that theme next week inside of the Global Black Experience. Don't forget the Slave Theater tonight. Special tribute to Nana Dr. Leonard Jeffries. It'll be taking place. Alton Maddox will join us again next week, same time, inside of the Global Black Experience. We'll just extend him the extra half hour next week automatically because we know that we'll need the time anyway. Brothers?
We'll be continuing the birthday celebration not only through tonight, but we'll be at the Clark House on Friday evening and the First World on Saturday.
Great.
And that will be a major celebration. So Alton will kick it off tonight with the UAM, and we'll continue it through Saturday.
What about the times?
It will be at 7 o'clock at the Clark House on Friday, and it will be at 4 at St. James on 141st and St. Nicholas for Saturday, the First World Alliance.
And he will be there on time because he'll have something that will help him do that. All right. Brothers, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
All right, no trouble. Thank you, Minister Clemson Brown. All right, we'll take a break. The GBE Radio Magazine will be coming back with our guest in a moment. Really an interesting sister. Gloria Millette is her name, and the book is called When We Practice to Deceive. A deadly courtroom battle becomes a real-life nightmare for two women, both lawyers, one black, one passing for white.
Of the oppressor, which would somewhat put you in a real danger zone.
Absolutely.
And so, therefore, I said, look, try to reach anybody. You know, I give you some names. As a form of resistance for many years. It's just it hadn't really been done in the legal profession.
Okay.
You know, lawyers had not really perfected the system of non-cooperation. But it had been done elsewhere. So you began to elevate civil disobedience, you know, into the legal profession where it had not been done somewhere else.
Let me ask you a question about this. I have talked with some people, and these are some cases people who are involved in some sovereignty issues, and they have said to me that in reading the codes of the oath and whatnot,
Sure.
lawyers accept that to a great extent they are under a certain kind of mandate to follow certain laws of the court that ultimately in some cases almost makes them an enemy to their client.
Yeah, well,
Can you comment about that?
Well, you know, it is. Just let me.
Because that puts what you're
Sure,
saying in
sure.
another context, because not only are you engaging in the protest that you're talking about, but you're doing it in a situation where there is a oath, presumably, that you have to follow that ultimately places you at conflict with your client to some extent.
Well, it does, and that was the whole fear that I had.
Yeah.
Was the fact that I couldn't turn on my clients. See, that was the whole problem. That's the reason why, in situations like Howard Beach, you know, something like that had never happened before in the sense of a special prosecutor, you know, and then ultimately people being convicted, even though not necessarily what they should have gotten, but just the idea there was some form of conviction. These were things that were contrary to custom, you see, which is also very important in the law, because the law, to a large extent, is based on custom. What are the customs? You know, that's what Dr. King was struggling against in Alabama, in Georgia, and Mississippi. Reason versus custom. The issue of whether reality controls thoughts or whether thoughts control reality. You see? So, therefore, it wasn't the custom to do the things that I did in that way, because that is more than anything else. Lawyers ultimately have to uphold the system that feeds them, you see,
exactly.
and not try to tear it down. They can move within it, but not try to expose it to the light, you know, show the contradictions and inconsistencies in it, you know, and so those are the parameters. And so then when Tawana Brawley came up, and, you know, Sonny Carson knows this, I, like everybody else, was very outraged at what had happened, you know, what I heard in the Brawley case. And that was like on a Saturday or Sunday, you know, you heard it on the radio, you know, what happened to this young girl. And obviously we were all outraged about that. But then the family started calling me. And then things started, you know, going a little different. I mean, I'm just being honest about
I understand,
it, you know.
yes.
And I wasn't taking the calls. All right, I mean, really, that's reality.
Is that right?
Yeah, I wasn't taking the calls because, you see, again, you begin to recognize what your conscience is going to dictate you to do if you have to get involved. and your fear that the consciousness in your community is not great enough to really sustain you beyond it. See, that's the real problem, you see.
Absolutely.
Because when they start throwing these things out here to the black community about what she should have done and this and that, then our people get all confused.
And how wrong you are if you took a particular step. Yeah.
And all of that. So, you know, then you begin to say, you know, what I know has to be done doesn't square with what my people encompass in terms of their ability to really appreciate it and to sustain it and to really support it. So, therefore, I just didn't return the calls, you know. And I felt very bad about that too. But then I knew that if I returned the call, I was going to do something the other lawyer was not going to do.
Hold on to that point. Hold on. We'll come right back.
He thought this was
Yeah, this is, and I said to myself, is this the same brother getting ready to say something to me about language? I said, all right, fine. And he was all right for a minute.
Right.
But then when it was language, period.
Right.
No issue of philosophy.
Right.
That's when I said, no.
No, right.
You know, no. I mean,
Right.
you act like people in Africa speaking their own language and don't have a philosophy. And they don't. They don't.
No,
I mean, it's crazy. You know, and it's funny because more and more you see it very clearly that when we talk about like having a national culture, the problem with us having a national culture is we don't have a philosophy, a common philosophy.
Right, we don't have the same beliefs.
We don't.
Right.
You know, and what happens is, and frankly, what's crazy is we might, but we ain't never declared it.
Declared it, right. That's it, right.
We don't even know if we got the same beliefs.
Right. We don't, that's it, you know what I mean?
Crazy.
Because, you know, when you look at Malcolm and Dr. King, the interesting thing is that starting with the major premise, they were all in agreement.
Exactly.
That the system was unjust.
Exactly.
You know
That's
what I mean?
right. That's
You
right.
know,
That's right.
one thing that they were not in disagreement about.
They had a special on Dr. King.
Right.
Actually, it wasn't on Dr. King. Maybe it was on the Civil Rights Movement. ABC did it about a week ago. And a friend of mine called me on Sunday. It was in during Like It Is. During the time that Like It Is was normally on. Yeah.
Right.
And Lou Gossett or somebody was, I think, hosting it.
Right.
But they had a clip of Malcolm that I caught. I've never seen this clip before. But Malcolm said, he was talking about the march on, the Selma March. He said, I may not agree with all the tactics of Dr. King.
Right.
He said, but in principle, he's right.
Right. Yeah.
And I had never seen this.
Right.
You know, but it was Malcolm saying
it. Right.
In principle, he's right. In principle is back to what you're saying about philosophy.
Right.
Of course, yeah.
Right. You see, and that, but you see, we don't even have those philosophical discussions anymore.
That's right.
I mean, even people, when they make speeches to us, they're not dealing into philosophy.
Right. Exactly.
And they're not dealing in history. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I mean, and you saw that and heard that with Malcolm, Dr. King, you know, and Marcus Garvey, Marcus Garvey. You heard that. You know what I mean?
Right. That's
you
right.
know, you heard the philosophy, you heard the history. You know what I mean?
Right.
That was the beauty of it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's what has gone away from our argument today.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have a philosophical base.
Isn't this some? Hold on, here we go. We're back with you inside of the GBE Radio Magazine, Philosophy and the Law, today with attorney Alton Maddox joining us in our theme, Understanding Our Power Under the Law. I'm not Imhotep, Gary Byrd. Attorney Maddox, you were talking with us about the Brawley case, and you were mentioning that you had initially some reluctance to accept it, and that reluctance was based on what you knew it was going to take to actually address this case successfully, and that related to what had developed as your philosophy in relationship to the law.
Yeah, and what happened was Sonny Carson, who had my home number, still probably does, because Sonny and I have, you know, we've been close over the years, even though sometimes we have our little disagreements, but he know I love him and he loves me, I'm sure.
Yes.
But he called me early one morning and said, brother, this is Sonny Carson. And I said, yes, Sonny, what's going on? The Brawley's been trying to reach you. And I said, oh yeah? Knowing that they had, you know. And he said, brother, you know, this cannot go undressed, you know, and I don't know what's wrong here, you know. But I immediately demand that you get on the phone right away and get him a call. You know, if you don't have the number, I have the number right here. And so the rest is history, you know.
Yes.
But you see, the point of it is that I knew that the system was evil. I knew there was a historic pattern of rape and murder and maiming of our women.
And Sonny Carson clearly knew you were the person who had to
Well,
address it.
apparently he did. You know, I wish he had called someone else, you know. But my point though is that when you get caught up with a real philosophy,
Yes.
you see, a
Yes.
life, not emotions. See, I don't want to, if I don't like to be around people who say, well, I just hate white people, that's why I'm here. You know, that's what I'm doing this because I hate white people. Well, you see, that person doesn't really understand the parameters of what is really at issue. You know, just to simply hate somebody, that's why I'm here. I'm operating on my emotions. You see, not no philosophical base, because see, those emotions can be tampered with.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? They can be soothed, they can be dealt with. But when you have a deep philosophical base, you see, it's hard to really deviate from that. That's the reason why everybody with a philosophy have either been killed or jailed, you see, because that's something totally different. People don't worry about people who just hate somebody on emotions. But when you develop a philosophy, you see, and that's what is lacking in terms of black leadership today. You don't hear philosophical arguments today. You don't hear any reference to philosophy or any reference to history in what they say. You know, and I have gone back and started reading again philosophy opinions of Marcus Garvey, the philosophy of Dr. King, the philosophy of Malcolm X, and then you begin to compare those teachings and writings with what is going on today, and you realize that that's the void. You see, that's the ethics is lacking. You know, when Dr. King, for example, went off on marches, the first thing people had to do was go through self-purification. You see, before they did anything, they had to purify themselves.
And he called it that.
Right, yeah, he called it that, you see, because you see, your ethics had to be correct. I mean, your judgment had to be on high standards, you know, the ability to make the right choice, to engage in the right action, had to be based on your ethics. None of that is happening today, you see, so we have lost a lot of what has been given to us. We just didn't pass it on. We just didn't embrace it. We began to commercialize the movement, you see, and deal with techniques instead of dealing with philosophy and history, you know, that really could propel us once again back into our greatness.
Let's talk about this in relationship to the people. And I say the people because in that sense, if the leadership is not coming with a philosophical foundation in its presentation, then one usually won't expect the people to be operating with one.
Right.
How do we make, and what adjustments do you think we need to make now to develop a philosophy? I'm going to point to two stories very quickly. One is the story that Glenda Cadogan has, this thing about the police nightmare for the Flatbush mother where the police broke in to the house. It is only one of many stories that clearly indicate police abusing authority at a higher level and an increased level across the city. Another story that appeared yesterday in a rag which I won't name, but it has a judge who you may be familiar with. His name is Judge Harold Rothwax. You're laughing already, see? This is New York State Supreme Court Justice who's been called the Prince of Darkness, it says, and who's presided over some of the most high-profile cases of recent years. He has a book called Guilty. And he talks about a number of things. He says he wants to limit a suspect's right to an attorney during interrogation. He limited the defendant's right to a speedy trial. He wants to change the jury system. He says some jurors aren't smart enough to reach the right verdict. And on and on. I mean, it's worse than that, but I'm just giving you highlights. But here's two scenarios. One where the public is actually saying, this thing is happening. The police are coming in. They're breaking in. This is clearly brutality. What do we do about that? And there's no philosophy, apparently, of leadership that brings us together on that. And then here is a judge who's actually saying, look, let's forget all this. We're wasting time. One of the points he makes is that police have the right to go through whatever they need to interrogate a suspect. How else will they get to the truth?
Well,
Please.
I want to deal with 2 points. One is personal experience with Judge Harold Rothwax.
All right.
But before I go to the personal experience with him, I want to do this as a foundation, which I think maybe encompass and explain what all this is about.
All right.
You know, when you look at the law itself, there's so many areas of the law. You know, you have trust law and contracts law and constitutional law and agency law and bailment law. It's just on and on and on, you know. And so you look at all of these large subjects, you know, and say, wow, you know, I mean, how do I grasp all of that, you know? And when I went to law school, you know, obviously I always wanted to look for something easy to get me through this because I didn't have a lot of time to be spending these classrooms and all of that, you know, because I had other things to do, you know. The worst thing in the world is to go to European schools and then having to sit in their classrooms and listen to stuff that just really made no sense at all, you know. So what I did a lot of time was obviously was play hooky and didn't go to school. But I also, you know, analyzed the law at home or wherever I was to try to find a common denominator, the least common denominator, to sort of guide you through all of this.
All right.
And what I came up with is that ultimately, law as was taught to us here in this country all boiled down to rights and duties. Rights and duties.
Okay.
That's what it boils down to. Now, one thing about critical thinking is in looking at what somebody said, the first thing you should do is to go back and say, well, what they didn't say. Now, I said rights and duties. I did not say right and wrong.
Absolutely.
I did not say good and bad. I said rights and duties. You see? So, therefore, what you begin to understand is that the whole issue of right and wrong, the ethical concerns, the moral concerns that we have, is not what the law is about at all. You see, so we look at these stories and, man, wasn't that bad? Man, wasn't that wrong? You know what I mean? You see what they did to that sister over there with those 6 children. Wasn't that wrong?
Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Wasn't that bad? But that's not what the law is about. The law is about rights and duties, not right and wrong. Wow. You see, so we are operating on a whole spirit that don't even relate to our reality. You see, and so we get caught up in the confusion of not understanding the structure in which we are operating in.
There's 2 points let me throw out here very quickly. Right. The woman said in the story, she said, when I asked them to see a search warrant, one cop said to me, lady, you watch too much TV, we don't need a warrant. After they tore up the floor and didn't find anything, the officer said, we're sorry, we did not find what we were looking for, but we are just doing our jobs.
You know, what they're simply saying, you see, is this. The other concept is lawful authority and arbitrary power. See,
say this again.
Lawful authority.
Lawful authority.
And arbitrary power.
And arbitrary power.
You see, the reason why the system is unjust is because public officials exercise against us arbitrary power. You see, so therefore, it's not a question of whether there's any real relationship to us and them, whether there are any rules that really control us or not. Because if you go back to a historical point, you got to recognize that the legal system has never applied reason to us. See, that's important because the whole institutional law is supposed to be based on reason. The ability to reason, the ability to make deductions, you know, come to rational conclusions. I mean, that's the whole essence of the legal system. But we have always been part of a formula. You see, the codes that were written were always based on formulas and not principles. So therefore, there was nothing to reason from. You just fit in that formula or not.